Welcome to Ancient Relics Keeper, where forgotten civilizations, unexplained wonders, and ancient secrets come back to life. Ready to unravel the mystery? Let's begin the journey. In a South African cave, a single fossil skull was found that shattered our simple picture of human evolution. Dated to 2 million years old, the skull of Paranthropus robustus revealed a strange and powerful relative we never knew we had. A successful cousin, who took a very different evolutionary path. The story of human evolution is often told as a simple linear progression, a straight line of march from a stooped ape-like creature to an upright, intelligent modern human. It's an elegant and satisfying narrative, the kind we see in textbooks and museum charts. But the real story, the one written in the fossil record itself, is far more complex, more surprising, and infinitely more interesting. It is not a straight line but a dense branching bush, with many different kinds of human relatives or hominins, exploring different ways of life. Most of these other branches eventually died out, leaving only our own Homo sapiens to inherit the Earth. For a long time, we knew very little about these other branches. But in the 20th century, a series of stunning discoveries in the limestone caves of South Africa began to reveal the faces of our lost family members. And one of these faces was so strange, so powerful, and so unexpected that it forced us to completely rewrite our understanding of the human story. This is the story of the discovery of Paranthropus robustus, a robust near-man, a creature that showed us there was another very different and very successful way to be a hominin. Our story begins not with a famous scientist, but with the sharp eyes of a curious schoolboy. The year is 1938, and our story begins in a place called Kromdraai, a gentle rolling landscape of grassy hills about 30 miles from Johannesburg, South Africa. This region, later to be known as the cradle of humankind, is dotted with limestone caves. Over millions of years, these caves acted as natural traps. Animals would fall in, predators would drag their prey into the dark recesses, and sediments would wash in, burying the bones and preserving them in a concrete-like breccia. For paleontologists, these caves are treasure chests of prehistoric life. A local quarry was blasting this ancient, fossil-rich breccia for limestone. A schoolboy named Gert Terblanche, who was familiar with the work of scientists in the area, was exploring the debris from one of these blasts. He noticed some interesting fossil fragments, including part of a jaw with a few teeth still in it. But what really caught his eye was a beautifully preserved palate with a molar tooth that looked strangely human-like. Knowing he had found something special, Gert took his discovery to the one person he knew would understand its significance, the brilliant, eccentric, and fiercely passionate Scottish paleontologist, Dr. Robert Broom. Broom was a legendary figure in the field of paleoanthropology. He was already famous for his work on other early hominin fossils, and he had an almost supernatural ability to spot important finds. When Gert Terblanche presented him with the fossilized palate, Broom knew instantly that he was looking at something entirely new. The molar tooth was massive, far larger and more robust than that of any known human ancestor. The overall shape of the palate was powerful. This was not the skull of a gracile, small-toothed hominin like the Australopithecus species that had been found previously. This was something else. This was a heavy-duty creature. Based on these initial fragments, Broom made a bold declaration. He announced the discovery of a new genus and species of hominin, one that represented a separate side branch of the human family tree. He called it Paranthropus robustus. The name was carefully chosen. Paranthropus means near man or beside man, indicating that he believed it was a close relative of humans, but not a direct ancestor. And robustus, of course, referred to the powerful, robust nature of its jaw and teeth. The discovery at Kromdraai was the first hint, the first piece of a puzzle that would take decades to fully assemble. It was the first time scientists had come face to face with this other kind of hominin, a creature that had clearly taken a very different evolutionary path. But at this early stage, the picture was still incredibly fuzzy. The discovery of Paranthropus robustus was exciting, but it also created a great deal of confusion. In the first half of the 20th century, the field of paleoanthropology was still in its infancy. The human family tree was thought to be a much simpler affair. At that time, the most famous early hominin from South Africa was Australopithecus africanus, the species represented by the famous Tong child, and later, the stunningly complete skull known as Mrs. Please, which was also discovered by Robert Broom at the nearby site of Sterkfontein. Australopithecus africanus was a gracile hominin, meaning it had a lighter build, a smaller face, and smaller teeth. When Broom found the new, robust fossils at Kromdry, the initial question was, how did they relate to these gracile Australopithecines? Were they truly a completely separate genus, as Broom had suggested? Or was there a simpler explanation? One of the leading theories at the time was that the robust and gracile fossils were not different species at all, but were simply the males and females of a single, highly dimorphic species. Sexual dimorphism is the difference in size and appearance between males and females of the same species. In many primates like gorillas, males are much larger and more robust than females, with big crests on their skulls and large canine teeth. The theory went that the large, robust fossils from Kromdry were the males, and the smaller, gracile fossils like Mrs. Please from Sterkfontein were the females. This was an elegant and simple solution, and it was a very popular idea for many years. It tidied up the human family tree, reducing the number of different species and presenting a more straightforward picture. It suggested that there was a single variable line of Australopithecines in South Africa, which eventually led to the emergence of the genus Homo. The idea of Paranthropus as a distinct side branch was, for a time, pushed aside by many in the scientific community. The problem was the lack of evidence. The fossil record was still very sparse. The initial finds from Kromdry were fragmentary. To truly resolve the debate, to prove whether Paranthropus was a real, distinct lineage or just the other half of Australopithecus, paleontologists needed more fossils. They needed a larger sample size, more complete skulls, and evidence of both robust and gracile individuals living at the same time and in the same place. The key to solving this evolutionary puzzle was lying just a few miles away, waiting to be discovered in another dark, limestone cave. The real breakthrough, the discovery that would cement the legacy of Paranthropus and forever change our understanding of human evolution, was about to be made. The next and most important chapter in our story unfolds at a site called Swartkrans. Located just over a mile from the caves of Sterkfontein and Kromdry, Swartkrans is a ridge that contains a complex system of ancient caves. And these caves, as it turned out, were an almost unbelievable treasure trove of hominin fossils. Robert Broom, convinced that his Paranthropus was a real and distinct creature, began to focus his attention on Swartkrans in the late 1940s. His instincts proved to be spectacularly correct. Almost immediately, the site began to yield an incredible number of fossils, and the vast majority of the hominin fossils coming out of Swartkrans belonged to his robust ape-man, Paranthropus robustus. Over the next few decades, first under the direction of Broom, and later under his successor, the equally brilliant C.K. Bob Brain, the Swartkrans caves produced dozens upon dozens of Paranthropus fossils. They found jawbones, hundreds of isolated teeth, parts of limbs, and most importantly several more partial skulls. This massive new collection of fossils from a single site was a game-changer. It provided the large sample size that had been missing. Scientists could now study the range of variation within the population. They found the remains of large, incredibly robust individuals, presumably males, but they also found the remains of smaller, less robust individuals that were clearly females of the same species. This proved that sexual dimorphism existed within the Paranthropus population itself. The large ones were the males and the small ones were the females. This definitively showed that the gracile Australopithecus fossils from other sites could not be the females of Paranthropus. They were two separate, distinct evolutionary lines. The work at Swartkrans vindicated Robert Broom's original hypothesis. Paranthropus was real. It was a distinct branch on the human family tree. A successful lineage that had lived in South Africa for an incredibly long time. The fossils showed that Paranthropus robustus had existed for over 1 million years, from about 2 million years ago to just under 1 million years ago. This was not a brief, failed experiment. This was a long-lived and successful creature, a master of its environment. But the most stunning discovery at Swartkrans was yet to come. The team was about to find a skull so complete and so perfectly preserved that it would become the definitive face of its species, a fossil that would provide the crucial, undeniable evidence needed to finally understand this unique and powerful human relative. The crown jewel of the Swartkrans fossil collection was unearthed in 1994 by a paleontological team led by Alan R. Hughes. It was a fossil designated DNH7, but it quickly earned a more poetic nickname, Eurydice. In Greek mythology, Eurydice was the wife of Orpheus, a beautiful woman who was tragically lost to the underworld. The nickname was fitting, as this skull was a beautiful face rescued from the dark, underworld-like depths of the ancient cave. But there was another reason for the name. At the same site, the team had also found a partial mandible, or lower jaw, of a large, robust male, which they nicknamed Orpheus. The hope was that Eurydice and Orpheus were a pair, a male and a female from the same time and place. Eurydice, skull DNH7, was the most complete skull of a female Paranthropus robustus ever found. It was a stunningly beautiful fossil, its bone a dark, rich brown, and its features preserved in incredible detail. For the first time, scientists had a clear and unambiguous look at the face of a female of this enigmatic species. She was robust, but in a less extreme way than the large males. She lacked the massive bony crest on the top of her skull that was characteristic of the males, but she still possessed all the hallmark features of her kind. She had the wide flaring cheekbones that gave her face a distinctive dish-like shape. She had the massive, powerful jaw. And she had the enormous, flat-topped molar teeth that were the signature of the Paranthropus lineage. The discovery of Eurydice was a monumental breakthrough. It provided an anchor point, a definitive reference specimen against which all other fragmentary Paranthropus fossils could be compared. It allowed scientists to confidently identify males and females, to study the growth and development of the species, and to reconstruct its appearance with an unprecedented level of accuracy. It was the face that launched 1,000 scientific papers, but perhaps the most important contribution of Eurydice, and the entire Swartkrans collection, was that it gave us an undeniable picture of diversity in our own family tree. The simple, linear model of human evolution was shattered forever. The evidence was now overwhelming. 2 million years ago, on the savannas of South Africa, there were not one, but at least two very different types of hominins walking the landscape. There was the lineage of the gracile Australopithecines and their descendants, early members of our own genus Homo. This was the line that was developing larger brains and beginning to make stone tools. And walking alongside them was this other creature, Paranthropus robustus. This was a hominin that had embarked on a completely different evolutionary strategy. It wasn't investing in a bigger brain or in complex technology. It was investing in sheer brute force chewing power. The discovery of Paranthropus, a story that began with a schoolboy's lucky find and culminated in the unearthing of Eurydice, had fundamentally and permanently rewritten the story of human evolution. It presented us with the lost cousin, a successful and powerful relative, who showed us that there was more than one way to be a hominin. And now, with this complete skull in hand, we can finally begin to analyze the bizarre and powerful anatomy that made this nutcracker man so unique. The discoveries at Kromdraai and Swartkrans proved beyond any doubt that Paranthropus robustus was a real and distinct branch of the human family tree. It was not just a variation of Australopithecus. It was its own unique creature, a successful lineage that thrived on the African savanna for over 1 million years. With the rich collection of fossils, including the stunningly complete Eurydice skull, scientists could finally move beyond simply identifying the species and begin to truly understand it. The skull of an animal is like an incredibly detailed instruction manual. It tells us not just what the animal looked like, but what it ate, how it behaved, and how it was designed to survive. When we analyze the skull of Paranthropus robustus, we find an anatomy that is unlike anything else in the hominin world. It is a masterpiece of biological engineering, a skull that was hyper-specialized for one primary purpose: generating immense and relentless chewing force. To understand this creature, we must now dissect its bizarre and powerful anatomy, feature by feature. We will explore the skull of this nutcracker man, a specialist whose entire head was a testament to the evolutionary power of a tough diet, starting with the most dramatic and famous feature of all. The single most striking feature on the skull of a male Paranthropus robustus, the feature that immediately sets it apart from any other hominin, is a prominent ridge of bone that runs along the midline of the skull, from front to back. This is known as a sagittal crest. In a large male, this crest could be an inch high, creating a bony mohawk that would have been a visible and dramatic feature on the living animal. For a long time, the purpose of such a crest on other animals, like the male gorilla, was debated. Was it a weapon for headbutting? Was it a display structure? A kind of bony crown to attract females and intimidate rivals? While it certainly would have made the males look formidable, the primary purpose of the sagittal crest is not for display or defense. It is purely a matter of muscular architecture. The crest is a structural adaptation that provides a massively expanded surface area for the attachment of a specific and very important muscle: the temporalis muscle. The temporalis is one of the main muscles of mastication or chewing. In our own skulls, you can feel it working if you place your fingertips on your temples and clench your jaw. It is a broad, fan-shaped muscle that originates on the side of the skull and attaches to the lower jaw. It is responsible for closing the jaw and for generating a powerful bite force. In modern humans, our temporalis muscles are relatively small. Our skulls are smooth on top because our chewing muscles are not powerful enough to require any extra attachment space. But in an animal that needs to generate incredible chewing power, a larger muscle is required. The problem is that the skull only has so much surface area. Evolution solved this problem in a brilliant way. If you can't build out, build up. The sagittal crest is in essence an extension of the skull's surface area, a bony fin that allows the temporalis muscle to anchor not just on the sides of the skull, but to extend all the way up and over the top, meeting in the middle. The size of the sagittal crest is directly proportional to the size of the chewing muscles. A large, prominent crest, like the one found on male Paranthropus, is a clear and undeniable sign of an animal with temporalis muscles of enormous size and power. It is the anatomical signature of a creature that spent a huge portion of its life engaged in heavy-duty, powerful chewing. It's interesting to note that this crest is prominent in males but absent or only very slightly developed in females, like Eurydice. This is a classic example of sexual dimorphism and suggests that the males, who were larger and more robust overall, may have had a slightly tougher diet or played a different social role that required this display of immense jaw power. The sagittal crest is the most obvious sign that this was a chewing machine, but it was just one part of a much larger complex of adaptations, all working together to create a skull of incredible power. The next piece of this puzzle can be found in the unique structure of the face. As we move down from the top of the skull, we are confronted with the face that is broad, flat, and unlike any other hominin. The defining features of the Paranthropus face are its massive and widely flaring cheekbones. In anatomical terms, these are the zygomatic arches. In humans, our cheekbones are relatively delicate and swept back. In Paranthropus, they were enormous, thick arches of bone that jutted out dramatically to the sides, creating a very wide, almost dish-shaped face. Like the sagittal crest, this feature was not for show. It was a critical part of the chewing apparatus. The zygomatic arch forms a bridge of bone on the side of the face, and underneath this bridge passes the powerful temporalis muscle on its way down to attach to the lower jaw. The size of the opening beneath the arch dictates the size of the muscle that can pass through it. A small opening means a small muscle. A huge opening means a huge muscle. The enormous flaring cheekbones of Paranthropus created a massive space, a veritable tunnel of bone, for its gigantic temporalis muscles to pass through. The entire structure of the face was re-engineered to accommodate these muscles. The cheekbones were pulled forward and outward, creating a dished or concave profile, which is a hallmark of the species. This facial architecture is a direct consequence of its dietary specialization. It's a classic case of form following function. The need for massive chewing muscles dictated the shape of the entire face, resulting in this unique and powerful appearance. But the temporalis muscle was not the only supersized muscle in the Paranthropus head. There is another major chewing muscle, the masseter muscle. This is the muscle that forms the fleshy part of our cheek, and it runs from the cheekbone down to the outer surface of the lower jaw. It is also a powerful jaw closer. The wide, flaring cheekbones and the deep, robust lower jaw of Paranthropus provided a huge attachment area for an equally massive masseter muscle. So Paranthropus had two sets of enormous, powerful chewing muscles, the temporalis and the masseter, working in concert. This entire complex, the sagittal crest on top, the flaring cheekbones on the sides, and the deep jaw below formed a single integrated biomechanical system. It was a muscular and skeletal scaffolding designed for one purpose: to bring its enormous back teeth together with incredible and sustained force. This was a creature that could not only bite down hard but could grind and crush tough, resistant foods for hours on end. The face of Paranthropus is a testament to this singular focus. It is not the face of a thinker or a talker. It is the face of a chewer. And the business end of this entire apparatus, the tools that actually did the work, were a set of teeth unlike anything else in our family tree. If the skull of Paranthropus is a chewing machine, then its teeth are the custom-built, industrial-grade grinding plates. The most striking feature of its dentition is the sheer size of its back teeth, the molars and premolars. This is why Paranthropus and its relatives are often referred to as megadont hominins, which simply means big teeth. And their teeth were truly enormous. The chewing surface area of a single Paranthropus molar could be up to 4 times larger than that of a modern human molar. They were massive, broad, flat-topped grinders, designed not for tearing or slicing, but for pulverizing. The premolars, which in humans are relatively small teeth, were molarized in Paranthropus. This means they had evolved to be large and complex, just like the molars, effectively extending the grinding surface further forward in the jaw. This created a huge, continuous cheek tooth battery, a vast factory floor for processing food. The teeth were not only big, they were also protected by an incredibly thick layer of enamel. Enamel is the hardest substance in the human body, and the enamel on the teeth of Paranthropus was the thickest of any known primate, living or extinct. This super thick enamel was a crucial adaptation for its diet. It provided an incredibly durable and wear-resistant grinding surface. A diet of tough, gritty, or hard foods will inevitably wear down the teeth over time. The thick enamel of Paranthropus was an evolutionary solution to this problem, allowing its teeth to withstand a lifetime of heavy-duty use. It's like having a set of industrial grinding wheels made of a super-hardened alloy. The lower jaw or mandible that housed these massive teeth was equally robust. It was very thick and deep, providing a powerful, rigid foundation for the dental battery, and withstanding the immense forces generated by the chewing muscles. The whole system, the massive jaw, the huge surface area of the back teeth, and the super thick enamel points to a diet that required an incredible amount of processing. The Nutcracker Man nickname came from the early belief that these teeth were used to crack open hard nuts and seeds, like a powerful vice. As we will see, the story is a bit more complicated than that, but the name perfectly captures the sheer power of this dental apparatus. It was a mouth built for crushing. But what makes this dental setup even stranger is the stark contrast between the massive teeth at the back and the tiny teeth at the front. While the back of the Paranthropus mouth was a formidable grinding factory, the front of the mouth tells a completely different story. In stark contrast to its enormous molars and premolars, the front teeth, the incisors and the canines, were incredibly small, almost comically so. They were often peg-like, simple in shape, and showed very little wear compared to the heavily worn back teeth. This is a profound and telling piece of anatomical evidence. In most primates, including humans, the front teeth play a crucial role in food processing. We use our incisors for biting, slicing, and stripping food, like biting into an apple or tearing leaves from a stalk. Our canines, while much smaller than those of a gorilla or a chimpanzee, are still used for gripping and tearing tougher foods. The tiny, reduced front teeth of Paranthropus tell us that it was not doing any of these things. It was not using its front teeth to prepare or ingest its food in the same way we do. It was likely gathering its food, perhaps tough grasses, roots, or tubers, and feeding it directly into the side of its mouth, straight onto the massive grinding platform of its cheek teeth. The small canines are particularly interesting. In many primate species, large, sharp canine teeth are not just for eating. They are also used by males for display, for threatening rivals, and for fighting for social dominance. The fact that even the large male Paranthropus had small, non-threatening canines suggests that their social structure may have been different, with less direct male-on-male aggression than is seen in species like baboons or gorillas. Or it could simply be another sign of their extreme dietary specialization. The evolutionary pressure for creating a massive, efficient grinding machine at the back of the mouth was so intense that it led to a dramatic reduction of the less important teeth at the front. There was simply no need for large incisors or canines when the entire business of eating was being done by the powerful molars. This combination of megadont back teeth and tiny front teeth is one of the clearest and most powerful indicators of the highly specialized lifestyle of Paranthropus. It is a dental paradox that can only be explained by a very specific and unusual diet. When we assemble all these anatomical features, the sagittal crest anchoring huge muscles, the flaring cheekbones making room for them, the massive jaw, the giant enamel-capped molars, and the tiny front, to the clear and consistent picture emerges. This was not a generalist, an all-purpose hominin like our own ancestors. This was a specialist and evolutionary masterpiece designed for a single, overwhelming purpose. This was a creature built to chew. The entire architecture of its skull was a testament to the power of its bite and the toughness of its food. It was a hominin that had taken a unique evolutionary journey, betting its entire survival on the success of its incredible built-in food processor. And for over 1 million years this bet paid off handsomely. The anatomy of Paranthropus robustus is a lesson in the power of specialization, a portrait of a powerful and successful cousin, who solved the problem of survival not with a bigger brain, but with a bigger bite. The skull of Paranthropus robustus is an undeniable testament to the power of chewing. Its bizarre and powerful anatomy, the sagittal crest, the flaring cheekbones, the massive jaw, and the enormous thickly enameled teeth paints a clear picture of a creature that was a specialist, an evolutionary machine built for processing tough, resistant foods. The anatomical evidence is clear, but this anatomy is just a set of tools. To truly understand the life of this lost relative, we must now ask the crucial question: what was it using these incredible tools for? By examining the diet and lifestyle of Paranthropus, we can begin to reconstruct its place in the ancient African savanna. We can see how this unique hominin carved out a niche for itself, a different path to survival that allowed it to thrive for over 1 million years. This part of our story is a fascinating scientific detective story, one that begins with a simple, common-sense assumption and ends with a surprising twist that has completely rewritten our understanding of this nutcracker man and its world. The first and most obvious theory about its diet came directly from its powerful anatomy. For decades after its discovery, the scientific consensus on the diet of Paranthropus robustus was guided by a simple and very logical idea. You don't evolve a skull that is essentially a giant biological nutcracker unless you are eating a lot of nuts. The evidence seemed overwhelming. The massive jaw and chewing muscles were clearly designed to generate immense bite force. The huge flat molar teeth with their incredibly thick enamel seemed perfectly suited for crushing hard, brittle objects. The nickname that became famously associated with this group of hominins, Nutcracker Man, was coined in 1959 by the paleontologist Philip Tobias after Mary Leakey discovered a related species, Paranthropus boisei, in East Africa, which was even more robust. The name stuck because it seemed to perfectly encapsulate the creature's entire evolutionary strategy. The theory went that Paranthropus had specialized in eating hard, difficult-to-process foods that were unavailable to other, more gracile hominins. This hard object feeding hypothesis painted a picture of Paranthropus foraging on the savanna for things like hard-shelled nuts, tough seeds, and maybe even dry, brittle tubers that were buried underground. This specialization would have been a brilliant evolutionary strategy. It would have allowed Paranthropus to tap into a food resource that its competitors, like the smaller-toothed Australopithecines or early members of the genus Homo, simply couldn't handle. It would have carved out a unique ecological niche, avoiding direct competition for the softer fruits and leaves that other primates were eating. The evidence for this was not just in the gross anatomy, but also in the fine details. Microscopic analysis of the wear patterns on the surfaces of Paranthropus teeth revealed a high number of pits and chips. This kind of dental damage is consistent with the diet that includes hard, brittle items. It's the same kind of wear you would see on the teeth of a modern primate that eats a lot of hard nuts. For a long time, this was the textbook explanation. Paranthropus was the ultimate hard food specialist, a creature that had sacrificed all other adaptations for the singular ability to crush the toughest items on the savanna menu. It was a neat, tidy, and compelling story that seemed to fit the anatomical evidence perfectly. It explained the sagittal crest, the massive jaw, the megadont teeth, everything. It was the reigning theory for over half a century. But science is a process of constant questioning and revision. And a new generation of scientific techniques was about to be applied to the Paranthropus fossils. Techniques that would yield a result so surprising and so contradictory to the Nutcracker Man theory that it would throw the entire field into a state of exciting confusion. The chemical ghosts of the creature's last meals were about to tell a very different story. The revolutionary new evidence came not from looking at the shape of the bones, but from analyzing their chemical composition. Just as with the saber-toothed cat skull from the Yukon, scientists turned to the powerful technique of stable isotope analysis. They took tiny samples of the superthick tooth enamel from Paranthropus robustus fossils and analyzed the stable carbon isotopes that had been locked away inside them for 2 million years. The logic is the same: you are what you eat. The carbon in an animal's teeth comes directly from the plants it consumed, or from the animals that ate those plants. And different types of plants have different carbon isotope signatures. In the African savanna environment, plants can be broadly divided into two groups based on how they perform photosynthesis. There are the C3 plants, which include trees, shrubs, and bushes. These are the plants that produce the soft leaves, fruits, and nuts that are eaten by animals like chimpanzees and gorillas. Then there are the C4 plants. These are the tropical grasses and sedges that dominate the open savanna grasslands. These two types of plants have a distinctly different and easily measurable carbon isotope signature. By analyzing the carbon isotopes in a fossil's tooth enamel, scientists can determine with incredible accuracy whether that animal had a C3-based diet, it was eating from trees and bushes, or a C4-based diet, it was eating grasses and sedges from the open savanna. When the first carbon isotope results for Paranthropus robustus came back, the scientific community was stunned. The Nutcracker Man theory predicted a diet of hard nuts and seeds, which would come from C3 trees and shrubs. The chemical signature should have been strongly C3, but it wasn't. The results showed a massive C4 signal. The chemical signature in the teeth of Paranthropus was not the signature of a nut eater. It was the signature of a grazer. The vast majority of the carbon in its diet, sometimes as much as 80%, was coming from the C4 grasses and sedges of the open savanna. This was a complete bombshell. It flew in the face of 50 years of established theory. This creature with its incredible nut-cracking skull wasn't eating nuts at all. It was eating grass. This discovery forced a complete reevaluation of everything we thought we knew about this hominin. The anatomical evidence pointed in one direction, while the direct chemical evidence pointed in a completely different and unexpected one. How could this be? Why would an animal evolve such a powerful and costly chewing apparatus just to eat grass, a food that modern grazing animals like zebras and wildebeest can handle with much less specialized anatomy? The solution to this paradox has led to a new and much more nuanced understanding of the life of Paranthropus. The shocking isotopic evidence forced scientists to go back to the drawing board. If Paranthropus was eating a diet dominated by C4 plants, what was it about that diet that requires such a powerful chewing apparatus? The answer seems to be not in the hardness of the food, but in its quality and its abrasiveness. The Nutcracker Man nickname was misleading. A better nickname might be the Lawnmower Man or the Garbage Disposal Man. The new model suggests that Paranthropus was a low-quality food specialist. It had adapted to survive by eating huge quantities of the toughest, most fibrous, and most abrasive plant matter on the savanna, foods that other animals couldn't or wouldn't eat. This could have included tough, silica-rich grasses and sedges. Silica is a hard, gritty mineral that plants incorporate into their tissues, and it is highly abrasive and wears down teeth very quickly. The super-thick enamel of Paranthropus would have been a crucial adaptation for a lifetime of grinding this gritty material. Another key part of its diet may have been underground storage organs, like the corms of sedges or the tubers and rhizomes of other savanna plants. These underground foods are often tough, fibrous, and covered in grit, but they can be a reliable and nutritious food source, especially during the dry season when other foods are scarce. So, the new picture is this. Paranthropus was not a creature that occasionally cracked open a few hard nuts. It was a creature that spent a huge portion of its day, every day, methodically and relentlessly grinding down enormous volumes of tough, low-quality vegetation. The powerful muscles and massive teeth were not for generating a single high-impact crack. They were for endurance. They were for generating continuous, powerful grinding motion for hours on end, breaking down the tough cellulose and extracting every last calorie from a diet that other animals would find inedible. This is why it needed such an over-engineered skull. It wasn't about the peak force of the bite. It was about the lifetime durability of the chewing system. This new model resolves the conflict between the anatomical and the chemical evidence. The skull is a powerful crushing and grinding machine, but it was being used on a different kind of material than we first thought. It was a heavy-duty food processor designed to handle bulk, not just hardness. This reinterpretation of its diet makes Paranthropus an even more fascinating and successful creature. It had found a way to thrive on the abundant but challenging resources of the open savanna, a niche that was largely untapped by other primates. It had become the primate equivalent of a cow or a horse, a highly specialized grazer. And this specialization allowed it to live successfully for over 1 million years right alongside some very interesting and very different neighbors. Perhaps the most mind-bending aspect of the Paranthropus story is the context in which it lived. It was not alone on the African savanna. The fossil record from the South African caves, particularly from Swartkrans, shows us with absolute certainty that Paranthropus robustus lived in the same place and at the same time as early members of our own genus Homo. The remains of Paranthropus are found in the very same fossil layers, as the remains of creatures like Homo habilis and early Homo erectus. For at least 1 million years, from roughly 2 million to 1 million years ago, our direct ancestors shared the landscape with these strange, robust, chewing machine cousins. This is a profound and humbling realization. It shatters the old idea of a single, linear human evolutionary path. The reality was a multi-species world. If you were to travel back in time to the savanna of Swartkrans 1.5 million years ago, you would have seen at least 2, and possibly more very different kinds of hominins walking around. Imagine the scene. You might see a small group of Paranthropus robustus, perhaps a large male with his prominent sagittal crest and a few smaller females, methodically working their way through a patch of sedges, their powerful jaws grinding away endlessly. They would be stocky, powerful creatures, focused entirely on their foraging. And then, perhaps just a few hundred yards away, you might see a very different kind of group. These would be members of an early Homo species. They would have a lighter build, a less powerful face, and a noticeably larger, more rounded brain case. And, most importantly, they might be carrying tools. You might see them using a sharp-edged stone flake to butcher the carcass of a small antelope, or using a heavy chopper stone to crack open a bone to get at the nutritious marrow inside. This was the scene of our family's deep past. 2 parallel experiments in what it meant to be a hominin, coexisting in the same environment. One lineage, Paranthropus, was taking the biological path, evolving its own bodies into specialized tools for processing food. The other lineage, Homo, was taking a technological and behavioral path, using its growing intelligence to create external tools to do the same job. For 1 million years, these 2 very different strategies were both successful. There was enough room on the savanna for both the specialist grazer and the generalist tool user. They likely did their best to avoid each other. While they lived in the same general landscape, they were probably exploiting slightly different resources, which would have reduced direct competition. Paranthropus was focused on its low-quality plants, while early Homo was increasingly incorporating meat and a wider variety of other foods into its diet. This period of coexistence is a critical chapter in our own story. It shows us that our own evolutionary success was not a foregone conclusion. For a very long time, we were not the only hominin game in town. We had company. We had cousins who were very different from us but who were, in their own way, just as successful. And this fact leads us to the final, great question of the Paranthropus story. If they were so successful for so long, why did they disappear while our lineage went on to inherit the entire planet? The answer lies in the profound differences between these 2 evolutionary paths. The fossil record from South Africa has given us a remarkable and humbling picture. For at least 1 million years, the ancient savanna was home to 2 fundamentally different kinds of hominins, 2 parallel evolutionary experiments unfolding side by side. On one path was Paranthropus robustus, the powerful chewing specialist. On the other path were our own direct ancestors, the early members of the genus Homo. For a very long time, both strategies worked. Both lineages survived and thrived. But as we know, only one of these paths led to the present day. Around 1 million years ago, after a long and successful run, Paranthropus robustus vanishes from the fossil record. They went extinct. Our own lineage, however, not only survived but went on to populate the entire globe. This is the final and most profound question of the Paranthropus story. Why? Why did our branch of the family tree flourish while their branch withered and died? The answer is a powerful lesson in evolution, a story of 2 different solutions to the problem of survival, and how one ultimately proved to be more resilient in a changing world. It is the story of the specialist versus the generalist. The evolutionary strategy of Paranthropus was one of intense biological specialization. Faced with the challenge of surviving on the African savanna, it evolved a set of incredible anatomical tools. It invested its evolutionary energy into its own body, modifying its skull, jaw, and teeth into a hyper-efficient food processing machine. The sagittal crest, the flaring cheekbones, The massive molar saw. These features were adaptations that allowed it to exploit a specific and difficult dietary niche: tough, low-quality, fibrous vegetation. This specialization was, for a very long time, its greatest strength. It gave Paranthropus access to a food source that was abundant and that other hominins couldn't easily eat. It carved out a safe space in the ecosystem, minimizing direct competition with its more gracile cousins. It was a brilliant solution, a testament to the power of natural selection to produce a perfect tool for a specific job. Paranthropus became the master of its niche. Its entire biology was finely tuned to a particular way of life. It was a creature built to eat the tough stuff, and for a million years that was a winning ticket to survival. But specialization in evolution is always a high-stakes gamble. It is a bet that the specific conditions you are adapted for will remain stable. And this is where our own ancestors took a fundamentally different, and ultimately more successful path. While Paranthropus was evolving a more powerful bite, the early members of our own genus Homo were evolving a more powerful brain. This is the crucial divergence, the fork in the road that would ultimately decide the fate of both lineages. Our ancestors, creatures like Homo habilis, handyman, faced the same environmental challenges as Paranthropus. They also needed to find a way to access more calories and survive on the savanna. But instead of evolving bigger teeth to process food, they began to use their growing intelligence to create tools to do the job for them. This is the dawn of technology, the single most important development in the story of human evolution. The first stone tools, known as the Oldowan industry, were simple but revolutionary. They consisted of basic chopper stones and sharp-edged flakes, created by striking one rock with another. These simple tools were not weapons for hunting, at least not initially. They were portable butcher knives and food processors. A sharp stone flake could do things that no set of teeth could. It could slice through the tough hide of a dead animal, allowing access to the meat inside. Could cut meat off the bone. And a heavy chopper stone could be used to smash open long bones to get at the highly nutritious, calorie-rich marrow locked within. This technological breakthrough was a complete game-changer. Our ancestors had effectively outsourced the job of food processing from their own bodies to the objects they created. They didn't need massive jaws and giant teeth because their stone tools became their external teeth. This had a profound effect on their own physical evolution. Because they no longer needed a powerful heavy-duty chewing apparatus, their faces could become smaller and more gracile. The massive chewing muscles shrank, which in turn allowed the skull to become more rounded and globular, creating more space for an expanding brain. It created a powerful evolutionary feedback loop. A bigger brain allowed for better tools, and better tools allowed for access to higher quality food like meat and marrow, which in turn provided the extra calories needed to fuel an even bigger, more energy-hungry brain. While Paranthropus was investing in biological hardware, our ancestors were investing in neurological and cultural software. It was a fundamentally different approach to the same problem of survival. And this new technological path had a critical advantage. It opened the door to an incredible dietary flexibility. The consequence of these two different evolutionary paths was two very different lifestyles. Paranthropus, the biological specialist, was locked into its dietary niche. Its anatomy was so finely tuned for grinding tough plants that it was not well suited for eating much else. Its small front teeth would have been poor at biting and tearing meat. Its entire digestive system was likely adapted for slowly fermenting and breaking down tough, fibrous plant matter. It was a successful strategy, but it was a very narrow one. Our ancestors, on the other hand, became the ultimate dietary generalists. By using tools, they threw the menu wide open. They could still eat the traditional primate diet of fruits, leaves, and nuts. But now, with their stone tools, they could also efficiently exploit a whole new range of high-energy foods. They could scavenge the carcasses of animals left by other predators, cutting off meat and smashing bones for marrow. They could dig up underground tubers and use their tools to peel and process them. They could crack open nuts and seeds with a hammerstone instead of with their teeth. They became opportunistic omnivores, able to eat almost anything they could find. This dietary flexibility is one of the hallmarks of the human lineage. It is our superpower. It meant that our ancestors were not dependent on any single food source. If the fruit wasn't in season, they could find a carcass. If there were no carcasses, they could dig for roots. This adaptability made them incredibly resilient. They were able to survive in a wide range of different environments and to weather the inevitable fluctuations in food availability. They were not tied to one particular ecological niche. The entire world was their potential pantry. This fundamental difference between the specialist and the generalist might not have mattered much during periods of environmental stability. For 1,000,000 years, the savanna was stable enough to support both strategies. The specialist Paranthropus could happily grind away on its preferred plants, while the generalist Homo could roam around, using its tools to exploit a wide variety of resources. They could coexist. But the Earth's climate is never stable forever. And when the environment began to change, the specialist's greatest strength would become its fatal weakness. The final act of the Paranthropus story was likely driven by the same force that has shaped so much of life's history on Earth: climate change. The Pleistocene was a period of intense climatic fluctuation, with cycles of warmer, wetter conditions and cooler, drier conditions. Around 1,000,000 years ago, the climate in Africa underwent a significant shift. The environment became more variable, and the specific types of tough, grassy vegetation that Paranthropus had specialized in may have become less reliable, or may have been replaced by other types of plants. For a dietary generalist like our ancestor Homo erectus, who was on the scene by this time, such a change would have been a challenge but not a catastrophe. If one food source became scarce, their intelligence, their tools, and their flexible diet allowed them to simply switch to another. They could travel further, hunt different animals, or exploit different plants. Their technology and their adaptability gave them options. But for Paranthropus, the specialist, this climate change would have been a disaster. Its entire existence was tied to its specific food source. When that food became scarce, it had no backup plan. Its highly specialized anatomy, the result of 1,000,000 years of evolution, now became a trap. It couldn't simply decide to start eating more meat. Its teeth and its gut were not designed for it. It couldn't adapt its behavior in the same way that the tool-using Homo could. It was locked into its niche, and when that niche disappeared, it had nowhere else to go. The very thing that had made it so successful, its incredible specialization, was now the cause of its downfall. The population would have come under immense nutritional stress. Finding enough food would have become a desperate, daily struggle. The birth rates would have fallen, and the death rates would have climbed. Slowly but surely, the population would have dwindled. The last groups of these magnificent, powerful hominins would have starved into extinction, leaving only their robust skulls and massive teeth behind as a silent testament to their long and successful reign. The extinction of Paranthropus robustus is not the story of a failed experiment. To survive for over 1,000,000 years is, by any measure, a huge evolutionary success. They were not a primitive dead-end branch that was less evolved than our own. They were a different kind of success, a powerful and elegant solution to the problem of life on the savanna. Their story is a profound lesson in the nature of evolution. It shows us that there is no single predetermined path to success. And it shows us the immense power, but also the immense risk of specialization. But most of all, the story of our lost cousin is a humbling reminder that our own survival was not inevitable. For 1,000,000 years we shared this planet with another kind of intelligent, upright walking hominin. They took one path and we took another. Their path, the path of biological specialization, ultimately came to an end. Our path, the path of technological and cognitive flexibility, allowed us to survive the challenges of a changing world and eventually to become the last hominin standing. The skull of Paranthropus robustus is more than just a fossil. It is the ghost of a choice not taken, a powerful reminder of the deep and complex history of our own family, and of the other human stories that were lost to time. The skull of Paranthropus robustus is a profound lesson in evolution. It shows us a successful and long-lived relative who took a very different path of physical specialization, not technological adaptation. They were not a failed experiment, but a different kind of success. Their story reminds us that our own survival was not inevitable. If the past still whispers to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Ancient Relics Keeper, because some mysteries were never meant to be buried.